Hey guys, welcome back to Small Doses of Insight. Alright dudes and dudettes, buckle up. This is part 2 of the Rurouni Kenshin movie series analysis, and today we're diving deep into the psyche of one of the most badass villains to ever grace the silver screen. Shishio Makoto from the 2014 Japanese flicks Rurouni Kenshin Kyoto Inferno and The Legend Ends. I'm going to cover this character over the span of these 2 movies. Spoiler alert, we're going all in, so if you haven't seen these movies yet, maybe hit pause, binge watch them, and then come back. Trust me, it's worth it. Imagine being so dangerous that the government decides to roast you alive to keep you quiet. That's Shishio Makoto for you. Once the successor to the legendary assassin Rurouni Kenshin, Shishio was the Meiji government's go-to hitman, but when they realized he was a bit too ambitious, they tried to off him by setting him on fire. Spoiler, it didn't work. Instead of turning into a crispy critter, Shishio survived, albeit with some gnarly burns that left him looking like a mummy's cooler cousin. Shishio's near-death experience didn't just leave him with a new skincare routine. It forged his brutal worldview. He embraced a survival of the fittest mentality, believing that only the strong deserve to rule. This Darwinian outlook wasn't just talk. He walked the walk by assembling the Juppongatana, a squad of elite warriors ready to overthrow the Meiji government and plunge Japan back into chaos. Underneath those layers of bandages lies a man of contradiction. Shishio is a strategic genius, always 10 steps ahead of his enemies. He's charismatic, able to inspire loyalty among his followers, even though he's basically a walking barbecue. But don't let that charm fool you. He's ruthless and willing to burn anyone who stands in his way. His relationship with his lover, Komagata Yumi, adds a layer of complexity, showing that even a villain can have a soft spot. Let's talk about Shishio's fighting skills because damn, this guy's a beast. Despite his injuries, he's a master swordsman, wielding his blade with deadly precision. His signature move, the Homura Adama, involves igniting his sword to deliver fury attacks. Yeah, you heard that right, he literally sets his sword on fire. This technique is as dangerous to him as it is to his enemies thanks to his body's inability to regulate heat, a side effect of being roasted alive. The climax of The Legend's End is the epic battle between Shishio and Kenshin. It's not just a physical fight, but a clash of ideologies. Kenshin believes in redemption and protecting the innocent, while Shishio is all about power and domination. Their duel is intense, with Shishio pushing his body beyond its limits. In the end, his inability to cool down leads to his demise, proving that sometimes being too hot to handle isn't a good thing. Shishio Makoto is more than just a villain. He's a symbol of the darker side of human ambition. His story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the lengths some will go to achieve their goals. Despite his evil deeds, there's a part of us that can't help but admire his tenacity and strength. After all, it takes a special kind of badass to survive being burned alive and come back swinging. To understand Shishio, you've got to imagine being literally burned alive and coming out the other side with a crispy body and a seething hatred for, well, everything. His behavior is defined by extremes. Every choice he makes stems from his deep psychological and physical trauma. But what makes Shishio fascinating isn't just his anger, it's how he channels that rage into a coherent plan. Dude's not just a walking flamethrower, he's a strategic flamethrower. Shishio operates like a mix of a war general and a cult leader. He doesn't lash out randomly, every move, every scheme is calculated. When he builds the Juppongatana, his squad of elite warriors, he doesn't just pick strong fighters. He chooses people who buy into his twisted worldview. It's like he's running a dystopian TED Talk, convincing people that survival of the fittest isn't just nature's rule, it's the only rule. This calculated manipulation is why his army is so loyal. They don't just fear him, they genuinely believe in his ideology. And let's talk about his obsession with power. Shishio doesn't just crave for power for its own sake, he believes it's the natural order of things. Weakness to him is practically a sin, but here's the kicker, he's also painfully aware of his own limitations. His body can't cool itself down, which is why his battle strategy always has a time limit. This vulnerability doesn't make him weaker, it makes him sharper. He knows he's on borrowed time, so every moment is maximized for impact. It's like watching someone play a high-stakes game of chess with only one knight instead of 2. Dude's intense. Shishio's decision to overthrow the Meiji government isn't just for revenge for their betrayal, it's a full-blown rejection of their vision for Japan. He sees their move toward modernization and peace as weakness. But here's the thing, his rebellion isn't just about destruction. Shishio genuinely believes his version of Japan, a brutal might-makes-right society, is the only way the country can thrive. Is it messed up? Absolutely. But it's also weirdly visionary in its own twisted way. He's not just a villain. He's an alternative to Kenshin's ideals, which makes their conflict so compelling. Choosing his crew is another masterstroke. Each member represents a piece of Shishio's philosophy. For example, Seta Sojiro, his right-hand man, is the embodiment of emotionless efficiency, someone who has internalized Shishio's worldview to the point of suppressing all empathy. Then there's Cho Sawagejo, who's more of a wild card but still respects Shishio's strength. These choices aren't just practical, they're ideological. Shishio surrounds himself with people who reinforce his beliefs, creating an echo chamber that solidifies his own sense of righteousness. There's one bit of a curveball though. Yumi, Shishio's lover, doesn't fit the strongest survives mold. She's not a fighter and she knows it, but Shishio keeps her close anyway, which adds a fascinating layer to his character. On one hand, it shows that he's capable of affection, even vulnerability. On the other hand, it reveals a possessive streak. Yumi isn't strong, but she's his, and that's what matters. It's both touching and deeply unsettling. Shishio's relationships are as layered as a stack of pancakes, except these pancakes are on fire and might kill you. Let's break down the key players. The rivalry between Shishio and Kenshin is the heart of the story. But here's the thing, it's not just about good versus evil, it's a clash of philosophies. Kenshin believes in redemption and protecting the weak, while Shishio thinks the weak should either toughen up or get out of the way. What makes their dynamic so electric is how much they understand each other. Shishio knows Kenshin could have been him if things had gone differently. In a way, he respects Kenshin even as he's trying to obliterate him. If Shishio had a protege, it's Sojiro. The kid's cold, calculating, and an absolute killer in combat. But their relationship isn't exactly warm and fuzzy. Shishio sees Sojiro as a tool, someone who perfectly embodies his philosophy of detachment and efficiency. Sojiro, on the other hand, idolizes Shishio but also struggles with the cracks in his own psyche. It's like watching a mentor-student relationship where both parties are walking on the edge of a knife. Yumi is the random variable in Shishio's life. Their relationship is almost sweet until you remember that Shishio's idea of affection involved using her as a human shield in his final battle. Yeah, that happened. But before that brutal moment, Yumi represents a softer side of Shishio. She sees the man beneath the bandages, the one who's been hurt and betrayed. In her own way, she humanizes him. It's messed up, sure, but it also makes him more than just a villain. He's a person, albeit a deeply broken one. Shishio's art is a masterclass in tragic storytelling. He starts as a survivor, someone who clawed his way back from death with nothing but sheer willpower. From there, he becomes a conqueror, building an army and movement that threatens to reshape Japan. But by the end, he's a man consumed literally by his own fire. His final battle with Kenshin is the ultimate expression of his character. Shishio knows his body can't take the heat, but he pushes himself anyway. Why? Because he refuses to admit defeat. It's not just about winning, it's about proving his philosophy. In his mind, if he can beat Kenshin, it validates everything he stands for. But when his body gives out and he burns from the inside out, it's a brutal reminder that even the strongest have limits. What's fascinating is how self-aware Shishio is in his final moments. He knows his downfall isn't just physical, it's the result of his own hubris. But even as he dies, he doesn't waver. He goes out believing he was right, which is both terrifying and oddly admirable. Alright, let's get a little intellectual for a second. Don't worry, I won't get too nerdy. Shishio can be analyzed through a few key frameworks. His survival of the fittest mentality is straight out of Friedrich Nietzsche's playbook. He rejects traditional morality and embraces a world where strength determines worth. In this sense, he's the ultimate Nietzschean figure, an Übermensch or Superman who creates his own rules. But his downfall also serves as a critique of this philosophy, showing that even the strongest can be undone by their own excesses. In Jungian psychology, the shadow represents the darker, repressed parts of the psyche. Shishio is basically Kenshin's shadow. Everything Kenshin could have been if he hadn't chosen redemption. Their conflict is as much internal as it is external, with Kenshin confronting the parts of himself he'd rather forget. Shishio fits in the mold of a tragic hero, albeit in a villainous form. His fatal flaw, his hubris, leads to his downfall, but it's also what makes him compelling. He's not evil for the sake of it. He's a man driven by his beliefs even when they destroy him. Let's go back to Shishio's origin story because, oh boy, if there's ever a way to define trust issues, it's getting torched alive by your own government. What makes this fascinating is how it hits a universal theme: betrayal. Sure, none of us, I hope, have been set on fire by the government, but we've all felt that gut punch of someone we trusted turning on us. For Shishio, it's not just a metaphor, it's the literal skin he wears. This betrayal becomes the core of his worldview. Watching him on screen isn't just about marveling at his villainy, it's about seeing what happens when someone leans all the way into their trauma. Instead of processing it or trying to heal, like Kenshin is out here doing, Shishio doubles down. He takes his pain and weaponizes it. That hits hard because, let's be honest, we've all had moments where we wanted to do the same. Like, remember that time Chad borrowed your PS5 and forgot to return it? Yeah, like that. The impact of Shishio's choices is a reminder of how trauma shapes us, often in ways we don't recognize. He's not just a villain, he's a mirror for our worst instincts. Watching him forces us to ask, are we really over our own betrayals, or are we just wrapping them in bandages and pretending they don't burn? One of Shishio's defining philosophies is survival of the fittest, like I said before. He believes that strength, not morality, not compassion, is the ultimate measure of a person's worth. And while that's objectively horrifying, because empathy is kind of important, it's also uncomfortably relatable. Think about it. How many times have you felt like the world operates on this exact principle? Job markets, survival of the fittest. Dating apps, survival of the fittest. College group projects, survival of the least lazy. Shishio's ideology feels so compelling because it's not completely out of left field. It's a distorted reflection of real-world pressures. Watching him dominate with this belief system taps into something primal in us, the part that secretly wonders if maybe he's right. But here's the thing, Shishio's philosophy is also his cage. He's so obsessed with strength that he can't see the cracks in his own foundation. His body's falling apart, his allies are driven by fear rather than loyalty, and his worldview leaves no room for vulnerability. That's the irony that makes his character hit harder than a late-night existential crisis. The very thing he believes is what destroys him. And let's be real, who among us hasn't pushed ourselves to the breaking point chasing some impossible standard? Shishio's story is a flaming, cautionary tale about what happens when you worship strength at the expense of everything else. The impact of that realization, it's like being sucker punched by your own reflection. Let's talk about relationships because wow, Shishio's got issues here too. His dynamics with people are, let's call them complicated. On the surface, he's a master manipulator. He uses Sojiro's past trauma to turn him into a loyal protege, and he keeps Yumi around as both a comfort and a tool. But scratch a little deeper and things get murky. Shishio's relationship with Sojiro is one of the most psychologically intriguing aspects of the movies. He molds Sojiro into a weapon, teaching him to suppress all emotion and embrace strength as the only truth. And it works. Sojiro becomes one of the deadliest fighters around. But what's haunting is how Sojiro's loyalty to Shishio isn't based on love or respect. It's based on fear and indoctrination. Watching this unfold is like watching someone get radicalized in real time. It's chilling because it reminds us of how easily people can be manipulated when they're vulnerable. And then there's Yumi. On one hand, the relationship humanizes Shishio. She sees his pain and he lets her into his world in a way that no one else can. But on the other hand, their relationship is problematic, to say the least. Shishio's affection for Yumi is tied to possession, not partnership. And when he uses her as a little shield in his final battle, it's a gut-wrenching reminder of how even love can be twisted into something transactional. The takeaway here, relationships built on control and fear are doomed to self-destruct, but hey, at least I'm not using my SO as armor, so maybe I'm doing okay in comparison. If there's one thing Shishio teaches us, it's the danger of letting ideology consume your humanity. Watching him go full throttle with his might makes right philosophy is like watching a train wreck. You know it's gonna end badly, but you can't look away. Here's the thing, Shishio isn't wrong about everything. His critique of the Meiji government as hypocritical and corrupt, fair point. His belief that the world is inherently competitive, also not entirely off base. But the problem is how he takes those kernels of truth and turns them into an all-consuming fire, both figuratively and literally. The impact here is subtle but profound. Shishio's story forces us to think about our own beliefs. How many of us cling to ideologies even when they start to hurt us or the people around us? Watching him burn in the name of his philosophy is a sobering reminder of what happens when you let your ideas take over your identity. Alright, let's get to the showdown. Shishio vs Kenshin is more than just an epic fight scene, though seriously, it's so epic. It's a psychological battle between two men who represent opposite extremes. For Shishio, this fight isn't just about winning, it's about proving he was right. He knows his body is failing him, but he refuses to back down because his entire identity is tied to his ideology. Losing to Kenshin would mean admitting weakness, and Shishio would rather burn out than face that truth. What makes this so impactful is how it reflects real-life obsessions. How many times have we pushed ourselves past our limits because we couldn't let go of something? Whether it's a job, a relationship, or an argument with a friend, we all have moments where we'd rather self-destruct than admit defeat. Shishio takes that to the extreme, and watching it unfold is both horrifying and cathartic. Here's the thing about Shishio. He's not just a character, he's an experience. Watching him forces you to confront some uncomfortable truths about yourself. Are you holding onto grudges that are burning you from the inside out? Are you obsessed with being strong or successful to the point where it's hurting you? Are your relationships built on mutual respect, or are they transactional? These aren't fun questions to ask, but Shishio makes you ask them anyway. And honestly, that's why his story leaves such a lasting impact. He's not just a villain you root against, he's a cautionary tale that lingers in your mind long after the credits roll. He's a reminder of the darkness we all carry and the choices we make to either confront it or let it consume us. Alright fam, let's wrap this bad boy up with a question that Shishio Makoto, the crispy king of chaos, all but demands we ask ourselves. Is strength, physical, mental, or ideological, the ultimate measure of a person? Or is there something more to what defines us? Before you roll your eyes and think, here we go, another what is the meaning of life part of the video essay, bear with me, because this question is as relevant to you slamming pre-workout at the gym as it is to Shishio trying to torch the government. And let's be honest, I'm just a dude on the internet with too much free time. If I can wrestle with this question, you can too. In Kyoto, Inferno, and The Legend Ends, Shishio's philosophy is crystal clear. Strength is everything. He's a Darwinist to the core, a might makes right kind of guy who believes the strong should rule and the weak should perish. In his mind, survival is the only metric that matters. But here's the catch. Is that really living? Rurouni Kenshin, our pacifist with a sword protagonist, offers a counterpoint. He's not out to conquer or dominate. His strength lies in his restraint, his compassion, and his refusal to take another life. These two characters aren't just fighting with swords, they're fighting for the soul of what strength truly means. And honestly, it's hard not to get existential watching their ideologies clash like that. So back to the question, is Shishio right? Is strength the only thing that defines us? Or does Kenshin have a point when he shows that true strength is about more than brute force? And where do we, the average Joes with gym memberships we barely use, fall on that spectrum? Let's break it down. Shishio is without question a powerhouse. The dude survived being burned alive, built an army of loyal followers, and nearly overthrew a government. His strength isn't just physical, it's mental, strategic, and ideological. He's the kind of guy you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley, or let's be real, anywhere. But here's the thing. His obsession with strength is also his undoing. He pushes his burned out body to the limit, ignoring his own mortality in the pursuit of power. He sacrifices relationships, humanity, and ultimately his life, all to prove he's the strongest. Watching him implode isn't just tragic, it's a warning. And yeah, I get it. None of us are out here trying to conquer feudal Japan, but how many times have we fallen into a similar trap? Whether it's chasing career success, trying to be the best at a hobby, or flexing for the gram, we all have our moments of Shishio level obsession. The question is, at what cost? If you're burning yourself out, hopefully not literally, to prove your worth, are you really winning? Or are you just setting yourself up for a Shishio-style meltdown? Now let's look at Kenshin. Unlike Shishio, Kenshin has no interest in proving his strength. If anything, he tries to suppress it. His vow to never kill again isn't just about morality, it's about balance. He understands that strength without restraint is dangerous, something Shishio embodies all too well. Kenshin's restraint isn't weakness, it's wisdom. He knows that power isn't just about what you can do, it's about knowing when not to act. That's a level of discipline Shishio could never achieve, and it's what makes Kenshin the perfect foil for him. While Shishio literally burns himself out trying to dominate, Kenshin thrives by staying grounded. And bro, let's be real, how often do we lack that kind of balance in our own lives? How many times have we overdone it, whether it's working overtime, partying too hard, or binge watching Netflix until our brains turn to mush? Watching Kenshin is a reminder that sometimes pulling back is the strongest move you can make. Now if only I could apply that logic to not eating at 2 a.m. One of the most thought-provoking aspects of this question is how strength plays out in relationships. Shishio's view of strength isolates him. His followers respect him, sure, but they don't love him. Even Yumi, his lover, is more of an accessory to his power than an equal partner. His relationships are transactional, built on fear and control rather than trust or mutual respect. Kenshin, on the other hand, finds strength in connection. His friends aren't just allies, they're family. Sanosuke, Kaoru, Yahiko, they don't follow Kenshin because he's the strongest. They follow him because they believe in him. And when the chips are down, that kind of connection proves far more powerful than any ideology. This contrast is a gut punch because it forces us to think about our own relationships. Are we building connections based on trust, or are we leaning into control and power dynamics without realizing it? Are we prioritizing strength over vulnerability like Shishio, or are we willing to embrace the messy, complicated beauty of true connection like Kenshin? Here's where it gets personal. Watching Shishio forces us to confront our own fears about strength, vulnerability, and self-worth. His downfall is a reminder that unchecked ambition can be destructive, but it's also deeply relatable. Who among us hasn't pushed too hard, held on too tightly, or let our insecurities drive us into a bad decision? Kenshin, meanwhile, offers a different kind of lesson. His strength lies in his ability to forgive, not just others, but himself. That's something Shishio could never do. And let's be honest, it's something most of us struggle with too. Forgiveness is hard, bro. Like, harder than leg day hard. But it's also what sets us free. So where does that leave us, the audience? Are we destined to burn ourselves out chasing strength like Shishio, or can we find balance and connection like Kenshin? The answer, as always, is complicated. Life isn't a samurai movie, though it'd be way cooler if it was, and we're not locked into one path. The question isn't whether we're strong, it's how we define strength in our own lives. Do we measure it by how much we can lift, achieve, or control? Or do we measure it by our ability to connect, forgive, and grow? Shishio and Kenshin offer two extreme answers to that question, but the truth probably lies somewhere in between. At the end of the day, the question isn't just what is strength, it's what's your fire? What drives you, pushes you forward, and lights you up? And more importantly, are you letting that fire fuel you or consume you? Shishio's fire burned too hot and it destroyed him. Kenshin's fire burned steady, guiding him toward redemption. The challenge for us is finding that balance. So next time you're tempted to go full Shishio on your goals, take a step back. Ask yourself, is this strength or am I just burning out? And if all else fails, remember this. You're not wrapped in bandages fighting an ex-government assassin on a burning battleship, so you're probably doing okay. Shishio Makoto isn't just a character who sets swords on fire and delivers killer monologues, though he's very good at both. He's a walking burning metaphor for the psychological struggles we all face. Betrayal, obsession, fear, and the search for meaning. He's proof that even the most terrifying villains can teach us something about ourselves if we're brave enough to look. So yeah, maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe he's just a cool dude with bandages and a knack for chaos. But hey, if Shishio taught me anything, it's that overthinking isn't the worst thing in the world. Just, try not to set yourself on fire while you're at it. Thanks everyone for watching this video. If you enjoyed what you saw, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Also, be sure to check out my other videos for more insight on other dramas and shows. Your support means a lot to me and it helps me grow this channel. If you have any thoughts, questions, or suggestions for future videos, please drop them in the comments down below. Again, thank you for watching this video and I'll see you next time.